Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has a message for Canadians worried about housing affordability.
We have faced these challenges before, and we've solved them by rolling up our sleeves, figuring it out, and working together.
Canada is most likely home to the biggest housing bubble in history. We've witnessed the 2008 housing crash, but this time the impact will be huge. Many people are already missing out on payments, and high interest rates added fuel to the fire. Will this be the end? According to a former Deputy Prime Minister, Canada's housing crisis is a product of decades of bad policy that started when the federal government left the matter up to the provinces in the 1980s. Sheila Copps, a former Deputy Prime Minister, stated in an interview with BNN Bloomberg that there was a sizable national investment in housing as well as housing policy and strategy when Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation was involved in developing homes. The policy changes, which dated back to the 1980s, played a major role. The decision that was made back in 1987 to get out of housing at a federal level has resulted in 30 years of underbuilt housing and also 30 years of not really analysing good public policy on housing, Copps said. I think that's a big issue. The Bank of Canada's monetary policy has provided easy money for 2 decades, which has contributed to Canada's inflated property prices. He currently sees risk in rising mortgage rates since Canadian bond yields are being dragged higher, especially at a time when debt-to-income ratios are at an all-time high. The worst-case scenario for a housing bubble is when a credit bubble is present underneath it burst. The Canadian system has pretty astronomical levels of leverage relative to incomes, and debt servicing has increased significantly. Experts claim that the housing market will eventually collapse, despite the Canadian banks' best efforts to prevent it. According to experts, Canadians with mortgages should prepare their budgets in case the Bank of Canada raises interest rates in the upcoming months. As the Bank of Canada moves to raise interest rates 10 times since March 2022, bringing the policy rate to 5%, many mortgage owners have felt the effects of increased borrowing costs. On September the 6th, the central bank made its interest rate announcement. Although a majority of experts anticipate the Bank of Canada to keep its policy rate next week, Bloomberg News stated that economic signals have been conflicted since the central bank raised rates in July. Data on the gross domestic product, which was announced, revealed a slowdown in the second quarter of the year, increasing support for a future rate hold. Laird stated in a written statement mentioned that borrowers should be budgeting for a rate hike so that they're ready if it does happen. An increase is unquestionably still an option because the bank decided to raise it at the most recent 2 announcements. In an interview with BNN Bloomberg.ca, Daniel Viner, chief broker at DV Capital, stated that even while recent interest rate rises have been mostly absorbed by mortgage holders, it's crucial not to underestimate the potential hold from the Bank of Canada. In Viner's opinion, keeping interest rates where they are could crystallize the impact of the previous rounds of rate hikes. Therefore, he explained, mortgage holders will continue to be affected by increasing interest rates, even if the central bank maintains rates the next week. In the case of another rate hike, those with variable rate mortgage programs with payments that climb with their prime rates could see an increase in their payments. Some people with fixed payment variable rate mortgages are seeing their amortization periods lengthened and are just paying interest on their mortgages as a result of increasing borrowing prices. According to a July article from Bloomberg News, 43% of mortgages at the Royal Bank of Canada and 48% at Toronto Dominion Bank had amortizations that were greater than 25 years. There is definitely a risk here that this thing does end up in a deleveraging cycle if mortgage rates go higher, unemployment were to rise, or if we hit the next recession, then these things do end up in a deleveraging cycle. Over 22 million housing units will be needed by 2030, according to research published in June by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, in order to help ensure housing affordability for every Canadian. The existing National Housing Plan would include 3.5 million more housing units. The scarcity occurs as Canada chases record levels of immigration, worrying both natives of Canada and recent immigrants. There is concern that Canada's population growth would increase demand, reduce supply, and raise prices to the point where owning is unaffordable. But is there a connection between the housing problem and the rise in immigration? Overall, the government and economists disagree, but nonetheless advise prudence and moderation. A major barrier to solving the housing crisis is affordability. The average cost of a property in Canada, as reported by the Canadian Real Estate Association, increased by 6.3% from July 2022 to $668,754 in July 2023. Many Canadians and newcomers alike could not afford this. In Toronto and British Columbia, where most immigrants choose to settle, the average cost of a home is even greater. Homes cost $856,269 and $966,181 in these provinces respectively. According to a research by the Environomics Institute published in October 2022, 15% of Canadians believe that immigrants are raising housing costs to an unacceptable level for ordinary Canadians. A Royal Bank of Canada analysis, however, disputes this and claims that the housing scarcity is a result of rising residential construction costs. According to the research, the price index has climbed by 51% since the epidemic began in 2020. Prices are higher as a result of lack of qualified labor, a lack of raw supplies which drives up expense, and higher input costs. The report also claims that the construction industry's high unemployment rate is a contributing factor to higher labor expenses. Employers must strive harder to address the workforce gaps caused by the upcoming retirement of a large number of skilled tradespeople in Canada. Because they have more options, prospective employees are looking for more pay. The government keeps increasing immigration levels. The Canadian government agrees that a large immigration population is essential to addressing the housing situation. By the end of 2025, Canada hopes to have admitted up to 500,000 new permanent residents annually. The goal of increasing immigration is the most ambitious in Canadian history. By the end of 2023, the nation also aims to welcome 465,000 additional permanent residents. According to a TD report published on July the 26th, Canada's population increased by 1.2 million during the previous 12 months. Both newcomers and Canadians prioritize housing as a top issue. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has stated that housing is not primarily a federal obligation, but rather the province's purview, despite the severity of Canada's housing deficit. He asserts that more work needs to be done to create affordable housing. There is a national strategy in place in Canada to increase the availability of affordable housing. As Canadian housing specialists will address Cabinet to share their perspectives, it is anticipated that housing will be a major topic of discussion at the current Cabinet retreat in Prince Edward Island. Economists advocate for balance to prevent any further damage. The housing scarcity may be alleviated by immigration, according to economists in Canada. According to the CHMC research, the housing problem is significantly impacted by long approval processes, causing significant delays from the time a project is proposed and the time it begins. In the short run, supply chain issues and a lack of skilled labor are driving up costs and prolonging the construction process. A rise in supply will put pressure on construction costs. The TD analysis claims, however, that Canada's immigration strategy is pushing the number of immigrants too quickly, especially in light of the increased facilitation of more temporary residents. Despite the short-term problems brought on by rapid population growth, economists and the government concur that Canada cannot address the housing crisis without more qualified individuals in the labour market. They claim that hiring more highly trained immigrants to build more homes will assist, but this is not the sole solution. According to some economists, Canada can use its current labour force if they're given the resources to earn the required credentials, or if their time is freed up from caring for their families. Will Canada's housing crisis get worse than the 2008 housing crisis? Let us know your views in the comments section below. So to get more updates and videos on the related content, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell notification to get the latest video updates. See you soon, goodbye.